Hi, I'm Roy from Roy's Garage. Today we'll be working on a 2005 Toyota Corolla 1.8 liter automatic. I'm going to be showing you how to replace the front pads and the front rotors. So these are the tools that I'm going to be using for this job. This is a 1/2 inch impact wrench. Going to be using a 14 millimeter and a 17 millimeter wrench. This is a 8 millimeter wrench, screwdriver, air gun, suction ball, a vacuum tube, some .3 brake fluid, some brake clean, a bottle of water with a hole on the top, ceramic grease, anti-seize, a hood prop, pry bar, a Phoenix brake bleeder, and a caliper piston compressor. Okay, these are the parts that I'm going to be using today to do this job. This is a one set front brake pads and 2 premium front rotors. Okay, so I took the tire off. I turned the steering wheel all the way to the left. So first thing we're going to do is loosen the bleeder screw. Now we're going to be removing this caliper. There's these 2 bolts right here. Okay, so I'm going to be hanging this caliper, get it out of the way. So we're going to remove these brake pads. Okay, so I'm going to be removing the caliper mount. There's 2 bolts right here. I'm going to unscrew. Okay, so we're going to be removing this rotor. Okay, so I'm going to be compressing this piston in. So what I'm going to be doing is putting on one of these pads, and then I'm going to be using my caliper compressor. I'm going to be putting it in here, and before we compress it, we're going to be opening up the bleeder screw. So as I compress it, the fluid is going to shoot out. You don't want the old fluid to go back up into the master. That's all dirty fluid. You might ruin your master. So always open up the bleeder screw and then compress the piston. Compress it all the way until it stops. Now tighten up the bleeder screw. Now I can hang the caliper back onto the wire. You don't want to let this caliper hang from the hose. You don't want to put any tension on the hose. So we're going to hold it up with the wire. So now we're going to be lubricating the caliper mounting pins. So I'm going to be removing it. Pull the boot down and pull it out. Sometimes if these pins get stuck, you might have to get a plier and pull it out and just wiggle it out. So I'm going to be cleaning off the old grease from the pins. I'm gonna get some ceramic grease. Put some grease right in here. Grease up my pins. And now I'm going to grease up the hardware. This is where the pad is going to contact. I'm going to be reusing the old hardware because if you try to put the new one on, a lot of times it doesn't fit good and wants to fall off. So if your old one is still good, reuse it. Nothing wrong with reusing it. Okay, I'm going to be installing this rotor. If you notice, this rotor is black. This has a black coating from the factory. Don't remove the coating. This coating is for so it doesn't rust, and it identifies a premium rotor. So what we'll do is we're gonna just clean it, get some brake clean, just shoot it on, and just wipe it down just in case there's any oil. You don't want any oil on the rotor. So what you do is you leave the coating on, and then when you do road test it, you're gonna notice that your brakes are gonna sound like it's grinding. But all this coating eventually will come off, maybe about 3 miles or so. Then eventually all that grinding is going to stop and all the coating comes off, and then you're good to go. So before I install the rotor, I'm going to be putting on some anti-seize right around the hub. That's so the rotor doesn't get stuck on the hub. Then we just put one nut on so it doesn't wobble on the hub. Okay, so now we're going to be installing the caliper mount. So make it really tight. So this is the old pad, the inboard, and this is the new pad. And the old pad, there is a wear indicator. In the kit, it comes with a new wear indicator. So what you can do is install the new wear indicator on the new pad. Okay, so we're going to be putting this pad on the inside, and this wear indicator has to be on the leading edge. This would be the leading edge and this would be the trailing edge. So your rotor is turning counterclockwise, so this one has to be up here on the leading edge. The inner and outer pads look exactly the same, so it doesn't matter which way you put the pads, inside or outside. So anyway, we're going to be putting on the outside pad. Okay, so before we put the caliper on, we're going to be putting a little bit ceramic grease in the back of the pad, the back of the inside of the pad, and I'm just going to kind of smear it. All you need is a very thin film of grease. So now we're going to remove this wire from the caliper. So before we're gonna put the caliper on, we're gonna be putting some grease, some ceramic grease on the caliper. This is gonna be the outside, and then this is gonna be on the inside. You just need just a real thin film. Now we're gonna be putting the caliper on. Okay, so we're gonna be tightening up the caliper bolts. Okay, so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna flush out the brake system. But before we do that, we're gonna have to remove the brake fluid from the master cylinder. So this master cylinder is on the driver's side. So what I'm gonna be doing is removing the fluid from the master. This is a very, very odd shaped master cylinder. If I only do it like this, I can only get the fluid that's in here. What I need to do is I have to put a vacuum hose in here and then suck it out. Okay, first I'm going to be removing the screen in here. Then I'm going to be sticking a vacuum hose in here. And then I'm going to get my suction ball. And then we're going to suck it out. So before I flushed this driver's side front, what I did was I flushed out the passenger side first because that is the farthest away from the master cylinder. So now I'm going to be flushing out the driver's side. So with my Phoenix brake bleeder, I'm going to pump fresh fluid from the caliper up to the master. Tighten this guy up. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to be sucking out the fluid from the master cylinder. Okay, so when I flushed out the brake, the old brake fluid went up to the master. So right now I'm sucking out all that old brake fluid, and I'm going to be adding in a new fresh brake fluid. So I'm going to be filling the master cylinder up with some fresh brake fluid. Putting on the screen. Putting my cover on. So now we're going to be bleeding the brakes. So I'm going to start up the engine, and I'm going to be pumping the brake pedal up and down no more than halfway. What I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be seating the caliper piston against the pad. Now I can feel pressure. So what I'm going to do now is with my foot prop, I'm going to press the brake pedal down with my foot prop. So I'm pressing it between the brake pedal and the seat. So I'm going to be opening up the breather screw a little to see if there's any air. If there's any air, then I got to do it again. So just open it up. You see it coming out nice and clean and a good stream so there's no air in the system. So tighten it up. Now I'm going to shoot some water on it. Okay, so I'm going to be squirting on some water on the bleeder screw because brake fluid is water soluble. Then I'm going to blow it down. Dry it off. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the car. I'm going to pressurize the brake system again with my hood prop. So I'm going to be pressurizing the brake system again to check for leaks. Hold it for about maybe 20-30 seconds. Okay, so it's been about 30 seconds since I went pressurize the system. So now we're checking for any leaks by the bleeder screw, and so far it looks dry. So that looks good. So before I put the tire on, I like to put a little anti-seize over the studs. Okay, with my pry bar, I'm going to be lifting up the tire. Instead of me carrying, I'm going to lift it up with the pry bar. Takes a little practice, but you can do it. So now I'm going to tighten it up in a crisscross pattern. That way everything bolts up straight. So I usually use my knees to hold a tire against the hub. Okay, so I'm going to be putting on the hubcap. But the easiest way is if you put the valve stem on the bottom, then you're going to find the slot that's in the hubcap. Stick it right over the valve stem, and then with your knees, hold it in with your knees, and on top you just tap it in with a rubber mallet. Okay, I road tested the vehicle, and the grinding sound that I mentioned earlier in this video went away. So now the pads are all broken in. If this is the first time you're watching my video, please subscribe and give me a thumbs up. Aloha.